Horrifying, when a homeless woman who once shivered in the bone-chilling cold of an Illinois night, pregnant with twins, yet not even having a full meal, is suddenly pushed to the brink of life and death in the most luxurious secret basement in Chicago. Can you even imagine a dozen of the world's top doctors with ultra-expensive modern equipment all throw up their hands and declare an emergency C-section because the two babies are about to lose their lives? But it's her, a poor housekeeper, abandoned by society, who screams through excruciating pain, "Wait, I know how to save my babies." And then, with just the pair of hands that once trembled from hunger and cold, she does what no one dares to believe, while the most powerful man in the city kneels beside her, eyes red with the burning love he has hidden for 2 whole years. Will the miracle from forgotten folk knowledge triumph over millions of dollars in modern medicine? Will love that crosses class boundaries save an entire criminal empire on the verge of collapsing in blood and betrayal? Brace yourself, because the story about to begin will shatter your heart, then revive it with fierce faith in the power of humanity. Before we dive into this chilling and mysterious story, please remember to subscribe to the channel Alex Truths, and like this video. Every subscription, like, and share from you is a huge spiritual gift and an incredibly profound source of motivation for the channel's growth, so we can continue bringing wonderful videos every day to everyone. There would be no greater joy than receiving your love and support through the comments you leave right below this video. Comments sharing your emotions or telling us which province or city you're living and working in while listening to this story. Alright, let's continue together and immerse ourselves in this amazing, captivating story that's filled with deep emotions. Emily Harper had never imagined that her life marked by endless cold nights huddled under threadbare blankets in abandoned cars along the rural backroads of southern Preece, Illinois, or scavenging for half-eaten meals from dumpster bins behind diners would lead her here to the gleaming underground birthing suite of Anthony Rossi's Gold Coast mansion in Chicago. It was October of the year 2025, and the wind off Lake Michigan howled against the historic graystone facade above. But down here in this hidden world of polished marble floors, crystal chandeliers dimmed to a soft glow, and state-of-the-art medical equipment that hummed like a symphony of wealth, Emily felt smaller than ever. She was 31 years old, but the mirror in the adjoining bathroom had shown her a woman who looked far older, thin frame, almost skeletal, from years of malnutrition, skin pale and stretched, tight over sharp cheekbones, dark circles, etched permanently under her wide blue eyes from countless, sleepless nights on the streets. Her auburn hair, once thick and wavy, hung limp and unwashed for days before Anthony's staff had gently coaxed her into a shower. Poverty had stripped her bare, humiliating evictions from rundown trailers, jobs lost to pregnancy sickness at a rundown truck stop, diner nights where the biting Illinois wind seeped through cracked windows, leaving her shivering and numb, her body aching with a deep, bone-weary cold that no amount of donated coats from church bins could chase away. She had endured it all alone, her belly swelling with twins she could barely feed herself, let alone prepare for. And then 2 years ago, Anthony Rossi had found her. It happened on a rain-soaked evening in the South Side, where Emily, 8 months homeless and desperately trying to shield her growing belly from the downpour, had wandered too close to a tense standoff between Anthony's men and a rival crew from the West Side, old grudges flaring over, territory disputes that Emily didn't understand. Cars had screeched to a halt under flickering streetlights, men in dark coats, stepping out with hard stares and low, threatening voices. No shots fired that night, just words laced with venom. "You think you can push into our streets, Rossi? This ends now." Anthony, fair-skinned with sharp Italian-American features, piercing dark eyes, silver-streaked black hair, broad shoulders, filling out an expensive wool overcoat, had stepped forward calmly, his voice a low rumble that cut through the tension like a knife. "Back off. This block is mine. Walk away, or we all lose tonight." The rivals had glared engines revving in standoff, but they retreated, taillights disappearing into the night. In the chaos, Emily had stumbled dizzy from hunger and fear, nearly collapsing into the gutter. Anthony had seen her then, curled against a chain-link fence, soaked and trembling, her threadbare jacket doing nothing against the chill. Something in his eyes had shifted, a gnawing guilt twisting in his chest like an old wound reopening. He was 58, a man who had built an empire in Chicago's shadows, powerful and wealthy beyond measure, with this Gold Coast mansion boasting lake views, private elevators, and rooms filled with antique furniture and art that cost more than most people earned in a lifetime. But beneath the power, remorse consumed him. Memories of his own losses, a wife gone too soon, choices that left blood on his hands he could never fully wash away. Seeing Emily so young and broken stirred a violent emotional conflict in his heart. The ruthless boss who crushed rivals without hesitation, now confronted with a pitiful fragility that mirrored his own buried pain. He had approached her slowly, his voice softer than she expected. "Miss, you shouldn't be out here. It's not safe." Emily had looked up, terrified her voice, timid and polite, despite the horror churning inside. Confusion, fear, a guarded curiosity about this stranger in the expensive coat. I'm sorry, sir. I'll go." But she couldn't stand, her legs numb, the world spinning in disorienting dizziness. Anthony had knelt this powerful man, kneeling in the muddy street, and offered his hand. From that moment, an overwhelming surge hit him, not just pity, but something fiercer, more intense. A passionate protectiveness that bordered on love from the very first glance. It tore at him unreasonably. Why her? Why now? Guilt gnawed deeper. He who had everything rescuing this destitute soul from the unjust world he partly ruled. He brought her home that night, installed her as a quiet live-in housekeeper, cleaning rooms she could only dream of caring for his visiting grandchildren, with a gentle touch that hid her own despair. The gap was stark, humiliating for Emily, eating meals prepared by private chefs, while remembering nights of empty hunger pangs, sleeping in a warm guest suite, while flashes of cold park benches haunted her dreams. She remained guarded, soft-spoken, always saying, "Thank you, mister." Rossi, in her timid southern Illinois drawl, afraid this fairy tale would shatter. Now in this crisis, it all converged. Emily's water had broken suddenly that morning, contractions hitting like waves of fire. Anthony, pacing the mansion's upper halls in his tailored suit, had spared no expense. 12 of Chicago's top obstetricians, summoned privately from Northwestern Memorial and Rush University Medical Center, filled the basement suite he had secretly built years ago for family emergencies. Monitors beeped steadily, IV lines dripped fluids into Emily's thin arms, soft lighting cast a calming glow over the plush birthing bed draped in Egyptian cotton sheets. But after 40 endless hours, everything had gone wrong. Emily lay there, exhausted beyond words, her body racked with pain that blurred into numbness. The twins, one positioned posterior, the other transverse, refused to descend properly. Her preeclampsia had spiked dangerously, blood pressure soaring, swelling in her hands and feet, turning her fingers puffy and useless. Heart rates on the monitors dipped alarmingly, beeps turning frantic. The doctors in their crisp scrubs argued in hushed, urgent tones. Position changes failed medications to strengthen contractions, only weakened her further attempts at manual adjustment, brought screams that echoed off the soundproof. "Walls. We're losing ground," the lead doctor, a stern woman from Yale training, announced. "Fetal distress is critical. We need to prep for emergency C-section now. The risks are high with her condition, but we have no choice." Emily heard the words through a haze of dizziness and shock, her world tilting in deep disorientation. Fear clawed at her, horror for her baby's anxiety, that this opulent room would be where it all ended, just like the unfair life that had stripped her of everything else. Tears slipped down her cheeks, silent and hot. She felt powerless, a poor nobody in a world of wealth, her voice too soft to protest. Upstairs, Anthony Rossi paced like a caged lion, his fair-skinned face pale with strain. Guilt consumed him anew. Why hadn't he insisted on earlier hospital transfer? Remorse for the dangers his world brought even indirectly. Seeing Emily suffering through the security feeds tore at him violently, this woman he had rescued now in agony under his roof. The surge of love that had hit him that rainy night had only intensified over 2 years. Quiet glances across dinner tables, her timid smiles igniting fierce passion, he buried deep, conflicted by his dark life. He couldn't lose her, not like before. Another tense confrontation had erupted earlier that day, delaying things further. Rivals from a South Side crew, emboldened by whispers of Anthony's soft spot, had blocked the private ambulance route with their SUVs in a bold street. Standoff near the mansion, engines idling under gray October skies, men leaning out windows with hard stares. "Heard you're playing house with some stray Rossi." Weakens a man. Anthony's convoy had stopped, his driver tense. Anthony stepped out, voice steel. "Move, or this ends badly for all of you." No violence, just raw power in his gaze, promises unspoken. They backed down, but the delay cost precious hours. Now in the suite, Emily's screams weakened to whimpers. The doctors scrambled, prepping the operating area within the room. Time was slipping away. In that moment of quiet, condensed stillness, amid the chaos, the beeps, the murmurs, the wind howling faintly above, Emily felt a strange certainty stir beneath the pain. She had overheard the doctors describing the positions, and something from her grandmother's lessons those long-ago nights in a crumbling farmhouse downstate whispered to her. But dare she speak? She was just the housekeeper, the poor rescued girl. Her voice, when it came, was soft, timid, laced with fear. "Wait, please." The room paused. Anthony, who had just descended the private elevator, froze at the door, his heart ripping open at the sight of her. The crisis deepened, inner turmoil surging in both their hearts. hers a whirlwind of poverty's lingering humiliation and sudden confusing hope, his a storm of remorse, guilt, and that overwhelming passionate love he could no longer deny. Emily Harper lay gasping on the birthing bed, the pain rolling through her in relentless waves that blurred the edges of the gleaming underground suite. The monitors beeped their steady warnings. The doctors' voices rose and fell like distant thunder, and through it all her mind drifted unwillingly, helplessly back to the life that had carved her into this thin, trembling shadow of woman. It was October of the year 2025, and the crisis unfolding in Anthony Rossi's mansion felt like the cruelest twist, yet in a story already filled with unreasonable, heartbreaking unfairness. She had been born 31 years earlier in a sagging trailer on the outskirts of a forgotten coal mining town in southern Illinois, where the wind cut through cracked walls in winter and the summer heat turned the tin roof into an oven. Her mother had worked double shifts at a truck stop diner until illness took her, leaving Emily barely 16 to fend for herself. Poverty then was not a word, it was a living thing that gnawed at her bones. Nights spent curled on a thin mattress, with no heat, stomach twisting from hunger listening to the howling wind that found every gap in the trailer walls. Days spent skipping school to scavenge cans for deposit money or beg scraps from church pantries. She remembered the deep, humiliating shame of wearing the same threadbare coat for 3 winters, the cuffs frayed to strings, the lining long gone while classmates whispered behind their hands. By 18, Emily had learned to disappear, head down, voice soft moving through the world like smoke so no one would notice how little she had. But there was one place she had never felt invisible, her grandmother's small farmhouse on the edge of town. Grandma Ruth, a lay midwife who had brought more than 60 sets of twins into the world during the hard years of the Great Depression, and after had seen something in Emily's careful hands and quiet eyes. "You've got the knowing child she had," said one frost-covered morning, pressing Emily's palms against the swollen belly of a laboring neighbor. "Feel that? That's life talking to you. Listen close." Under the dim light of kerosene lamps in kitchens that smelled of wood smoke and herbal tea, Grandma Ruth had taught her everything: how to read the shape of a belly for position, how to ease a breech with patient external pressure, how to guide twins, one posterior, one transverse, into alignment with nothing but skilled fingers and generations of passed-down wisdom. Emily had been present at her first twin birth at 14 hands, trembling but steady enough to help turn a stuck baby, while her grandmother murmured encouragement. By 20, she had guided 6 sets of twins herself in desperate homes, where doctors were hours away and money non-existent. She had felt the sacred thrill of it, bringing life safely through danger, with only her hands and her grandmother's voice in her head. But then the world had turned cruel again. Grandma Ruth passed quietly one winter night, leaving Emily the old leather-bound notebook of midwifery notes and a farmhouse the bank reclaimed for unpaid taxes. The jobs dried up. The boy who promised forever disappeared when the pregnancy test turned positive, and Emily found herself on the streets, first couch surfing, then sleeping in her rusted-out sedan, then when the car was towed for, unpaid tickets, simply walking the highways with everything she owned in a worn backpack. Nights under bridges, wind slicing through a donated sleeping bag riddled with holes. Days dizzy from hunger, legs numb from cold, the twins growing inside her while she rationed a single granola bar over 2 days. The humiliation burned deepest when kind strangers pressed a few dollars into her hand and looked away, unable to meet her eyes. She had been 8 months pregnant, swollen ankles, throbbing face gaunt from malnutrition, when fate or cruel chance pushed her across Anthony Rossi's path. It was a rainy Southside evening, the kind where the streetlights blurred into halos and the air smelled of wet asphalt and exhaust. Emily had been searching for shelter near an abandoned warehouse when the black SUVs appeared. Rival crews' word on the street said they were from the west side, hungry for territory, had boxed in Anthony's convoy at a red light. Engines growled, doors opened, men stepped out into the downpour with shoulders squared and voices sharp. "You're getting soft, Rossi. Word is you're distracted. Time to pay up or step aside." The threat hung heavy, no weapons drawn, but the promise clear in every clenched jaw. Anthony had emerged from his vehicle like a storm contained in human form, tall, fair-skinned, silver threading his dark hair, eyes black with controlled fury. His tailored coat glistened with rain, the kind of garment that cost more than Emily had earned in a year of waitressing. "You're on my streets, making noise you can't back up," he said, voice low and lethal. "Turn around. Go home. Live another day." The standoff stretched, rain drumming on metal roofs until the rivals backed down, tires screeching as they fled. In the sudden quiet, Emily had swayed on the sidewalk, dizziness crashing over her like the rain itself. She remembered the world, tilting knees, buckling the cold concrete, rushing up. Then strong arms caught her. Anthony's arms lifting her as if she weighed nothing. His face inches from hers had registered shock, then something fiercer. Guilt tore through him in that moment. Violent and consuming, a man who commanded fear in boardrooms and back alleys. now holding a starving pregnant woman whose ribs he could feel through her soaked jacket. Remorse for the world he helped shape one where a girl like this slipped through every crack. And beneath it all, an overwhelming surge, passionate, burning, impossible, rose in his chest like a tide he could not hold back. Love from the very first heartbeat of contact. It terrified him, this instant devotion to a stranger, and it tore at the walls he had built around his scarred heart. He had carried her to his car, ignoring his men's stunned glances, and brought her to the mansion that night. Installed her in a guest suite with soft lighting, thick carpets, a bed piled with pillows she had never known existed. Private doctors checked her discreetly. Chefs prepared meals she ate with trembling gratitude, too afraid to believe it real. For 2 years she had lived there quietly, cleaning rooms filled with art and antiques, caring for his grandchildren when they visited, always polite, always soft-spoken. "Thank you, mister." Rossi, she would murmur whenever their paths crossed, her voice timid, eyes lowered. She remained guarded, confused by his kindness, fearful it would vanish and leave her colder than before. Now in the birthing suite, that hidden past pressed against the present like a second skin. Another contraction seized her pain, sharp enough to steal her breath, and Emily cried out softly. The doctors hovered, monitors flashing warnings about the twins' positions. Anthony stood at the foot of the bed, face ashen, hands clenched at his sides. The love that had struck him that rainy night had only deepened every quiet thank you, every shy glance across the dinner table. Every moment he watched her gentle strength with his grandchildren had fed the flame. But guilt and remorse warred within him now. He had saved her from the streets, only to bring her to this danger under his own roof. The violent conflict in his heart felt like it might tear him apart, powerless for the first time in decades, watching the woman he loved suffer. Emily's eyes found his through the haze of pain. Confusion, fear, and something new, curious, desperate hope flickered there. She had never dared imagine anyone could care for her this fiercely. The disparity crushed her. His world of crystal and marble, her memories of cold wind and empty stomachs. Yet in his tormented gaze she saw a mirror of her own hidden strength, and for one quiet, condensed moment amid the chaos their hearts reached across the chasm. The monitors beeped faster. Time was running out. Anthony Rossi stood at the foot of the birthing bed like a man carved from granite, fair-skinned face, drawn tight with strain, dark eyes fixed on Emily Harper as if sheer will could force the pain from her body. The underground suite built years ago at enormous private expense beneath his Gold Coast mansion hummed with the quiet luxury that defined his empire. Recessed lighting that cast a warm golden glow over Italian marble floors, walls lined with soundproof panels disguised as elegant wood paneling, medical equipment so advanced it rivaled the finest hospitals in Chicago. Monitors displayed every heartbeat, every contraction in crisp digital lines, while a private pharmacy cabinet held medications that cost more per dose than most families spent on groceries in a month. It was October of the year 2025, and the muffled howl of Lake Michigan wind against the mansion above felt worlds away from this controlled, opulent sanctuary. Yet none of it was enough. 12 of the city's most renowned obstetricians, heads of departments at Northwestern Memorial Rush and the University of Chicago, moved with practiced urgency around the bed. They had been summoned in the dead of night, arriving in discreet black cars, signing ironclad confidentiality agreements before descending the private elevator. For 40 endless hours, they had tried everything modern medicine offered: intravenous medications to strengthen contractions, careful position changes on the plush birthing bed, ultrasound-guided attempts at manual version. Nothing worked. One twin remained stubbornly posterior spine against Emily's spine. The other lay transverse shoulder, first refusing to turn. Her preeclampsia had worsened dramatically, blood pressure soaring into dangerous territory, hands and feet swollen until her fingers could barely bend. The fetal heart monitors began to trace alarming decelerations, sharp drops that made the doctors' voices tighten with controlled alarm. "We're approaching the point of no return," the lead physician, Dr. Elena Whitmore, said quietly, her Yale-trained eyes flicking between screens. "Emergency cesarean is the only safe option now. We can have her prepped in minutes." Anthony's jaw clenched so hard a muscle jumped in his cheek. The word safe echoed mockingly in his mind. Safe. He had built an empire on controlling outcomes, territory disputes, settled with a single phone call, millions moved through, shadowed accounts, rivals backing down at the mere mention of his name. His mansion stood as testament. 4 stories of lakefront stone and glass, private gym wine cellar, stocked with bottles worth more than cars, a garage, housing vehicles that gleamed under soft lighting. He employed chefs who trained in Paris, drivers who once served diplomats, security teams that could neutralize threats before they formed. Wealth and power had always bent reality to his will. Until tonight, guilt and remorse crashed over him in violent waves, tearing at the carefully constructed walls around his heart. He had rescued Emily from the streets. Yes, plucked her from that rain-soaked Southside corner 2 years ago. But had he truly saved her, or had he simply moved her misery into a gilded cage? The memory of that night tormented him still, the way her thin frame had trembled in his arms, ribs sharp, beneath soaked clothing, eyes wide with animal fear and exhaustion. He had felt the surge, then that burning, overwhelming love that struck like lightning and refused to fade. Every quiet moment since watching her fold tiny grandchildren's clothes with careful hands, hearing her soft "Thank you, mister" Rossi, when he left a new coat on her chair, had only deepened the flame. Now, seeing her suffer in his own home, the remorse became unbearable. He had promised her safety, warmth, protection. Instead, she lay here fighting for her life and the lives of her twins, because his world's dangers had delayed proper hospital transfer. The delay had not been accidental. Earlier that day, as contractions first gripped Emily in the upstairs guest suite, Anthony had ordered his driver to prepare the armored Suburban for immediate transport to Northwestern's VIP maternity wing, a wing he had quietly endowed, years before, but word traveled fast in Chicago's shadows. A rival faction from the West Side, sensing vulnerability in Anthony's recent distraction with the pregnant housekeeper, had chosen that precise moment to make a statement. The convoy had barely cleared the Gold Coast when 3 black SUVs cut them off at a red light on Lakeshore Drive. Windows lowered just enough to reveal hard faces, engines revving in deliberate menace. Anthony's lead security man had radioed instantly, ambush set up. They're blocking both lanes. Anthony, riding in the center vehicle, had felt ice settle in his veins. Not fear for himself, but fury that Emily's safety was being used against him. He had stepped out into the cold October wind coat, flapping fair-skinned face carved into an expression that made seasoned men reconsider their choices. "You picked the wrong day," he said, voice carrying over traffic noise. The rival lieutenant leaned out, smirking. "Heard you've gone soft, Rossi. Keeping strays now. Maybe it's time someone reminded you who really runs these streets." No weapons appeared, just the raw threat of escalation, of chaos on a busy drive that could delay them hours, cost Emily precious time. Anthony's response was quiet. "Thunder, move your vehicles, or every deal you have in this city ends tonight." The standoff stretched, horns blaring from trapped motorists, until the rivals calculated the cost and peeled away. But the confrontation had eaten nearly an hour Emily could not spare. Now that lost time haunted him. Emily's weak cry pulled him back to the present. She lay pale against the mountain of pillows, auburn hair damp with sweat, thin arms trembling as another contraction seized her. The disparity struck Anthony like a physical blow. His world of crystal decanters and private jets against her memories of scavenging food bank leftovers, sleeping in cars with windows fogged from her own breath, enduring nights when Illinois wind found every gap in threadbare blankets. He had given her warmth, food safety, yet here she was, still suffering, still powerless against forces larger than herself. Her eyes found his across the room, wide with pain and something else, confusion, fear, a desperate curiosity about why this powerful man watched her with such raw intensity. The love burning in Anthony's chest felt like it might consume him whole. It was unreasonable, this depth of feeling for a woman he had known only 2 years, a woman who still called him Mr. Rossi, in that soft, timid Southern Illinois drawl. But it was real, and it terrified him as much as it sustained him. To love this deeply meant vulnerability he had not allowed since losing his wife decades ago. To love Emily meant admitting that all his power, all his wealth, could not shield her from pain. "Doctor," Whitmore approached him quietly. "Mr. Rossi, we need your authorization to proceed with surgery. The risks are rising by the minute." Anthony's gaze never left Emily. Another contraction bowed her body, a low moan escaping her lips. The monitors traced deeper decelerations. Time was bleeding away. In the heavy silence that followed, broken only by the wind's distant howl and the relentless beeping, Anthony felt his heart tear wider. He had built an empire on decisive action, on never showing weakness. Yet here, facing the woman who had quietly become his entire world, he felt powerless in a way no rival threat had ever achieved. Emily's hand twitched against the bedsheet, searching for something, anything to hold on to. Her voice, when it came, was barely audible, soft and trembling with exhaustion. "Please, wait." The room stilled. Anthony's breath caught. Something in her tone, quiet certainty beneath the pain, pierced the chaos like a blade. The deadlock held tension, coiling tighter as 2 worlds, one of immense power and wealth, one of crushing poverty and hidden strength, hung suspended in the balance. Word count approximately 1,500. The underground birthing suite fell into a sudden, breathless hush, when Emily's weak voice, soft, timid, almost lost beneath the frantic beeping of the monitors, cut through the chaos. "Wait, please." Every head turned. The 12 elite obstetricians paused mid-motion, gloved hands hovering. Dr. Elena Whitmore's brow furrowed in professional concern. Anthony Rossi, standing rigid at the foot of the bed, felt his heart slam against his ribs as though trying to break free. His dark eyes locked on Emily's pale, sweat-damp face, and the burning love that had consumed him since that rain-soaked night 2 years ago flared hotter, more painful than ever before. Emily's thin chest rose and fell in shallow, rapid breaths. Another contraction was building. She could feel it gathering like a storm low in her back. Pain radiated down her legs, turning them numb. But beneath the agony, a memory surfaced with startling clarity. Her grandmother's weathered hands guiding hers over a laboring mother's belly, in a freezing farmhouse kitchen, teaching her how to feel the exact lie of twins, how to coax a posterior baby, forward how to ease a transverse one into alignment with patient knowing pressure. She had done it 6 times in desperate homes where there was no money for hospitals, no time for ambulances. She knew these positions. She knew them in her bones. Through the haze of dizziness and exhaustion, she forced the words out again, softer than a whisper, yet carrying the weight of absolute certainty. I know how to turn them. My grandma, she taught me, with twins just like this. A stunned silence rippled through the room. One of the younger residents let out an involuntary, incredulous huff. Dr. Whitmore's expression shifted from concern to polite dismissal. Miss Harper, you're exhausted and in significant pain. We appreciate your concern, but this is a highly specialized situation. We need to proceed with surgery immediately. Emily's eyes, wide blue, ringed with the dark shadows of years of sleep deprivation and hunger filled with sudden tears. Not from the pain, though. The pain was fierce, but from the crushing familiarity of being dismissed. She had heard that tone all her life from social workers who closed her case files too soon, from diner managers who fired her for morning sickness, from shelter staff who turned her away when beds were full. She was the poor girl from southern Illinois, thin and malnourished, the one who endured cold wind slicing through threadbare coats on endless nights under bridges. Her knowledge, hard-earned in kitchens lit by kerosene lamps, had never carried weight in rooms like this, rooms of marble and crystal and machines that cost more than her entire childhood. Her voice trembled polite, even now the ingrained habit of a woman who had learned early that raising her tone only made powerful people turn away faster. Please, Mr. Rossi. I've done it before. 6 times. I can feel what's wrong. Just let me try. Anthony felt the words strike him like bullets. He had watched her suffer for 40 hours, watched her fragile body fight with a strength that humbled him. The love that had ignited the night he lifted her from the gutter had grown into something vast and uncontrollable, passionate, consuming, tearing at the walls of the life he had built. Guilt and remorse already gnawed at him for the delay caused by the West Side confrontation. For every moment his world's shadows had touched her. Now this, the woman he loved, the woman carrying life inside her, offering knowledge that could save her babies, and being brushed aside like a child. Violent conflict raged in his chest. He was Anthony Rossi, the man who made Chicago's underworld bend with a single glance. He could silence rooms, move millions, end threats with a quiet word. Yet here in his own fortress of wealth, the doctors he had paid fortunes to summon were dismissing the one person whose voice mattered most. The injustice of it, of Emily's entire life being dismissed, ignited a fury deeper than any rival standoff. But doubt flickered too. What if she was wrong? What if granting her request cost her everything? The thought of losing her, of burying another woman he loved, twisted like a blade. Dr. Whitmore turned to him, voice calm but firm. Mr. Rossi, we cannot delay. The fetal heart rates are becoming unsustainable. We need to move her to the operating area now. Anthony's gaze never left Emily. She looked so small against the expanse of the luxurious bed. Auburn hair plastered to her forehead, thin arms clutching the sheets as the next contraction crested. He saw the quiet desperation in her eyes. The same guarded, fearful curiosity she had shown that first night when he carried her to his car. She was still waiting for the other shoe to drop, still braced for the moment this safety would be snatched away like every other good thing in her pitiful, humiliating life of poverty. He remembered another confrontation months earlier that had nearly cost her everything. It had been a frigid February evening when Emily, 7 months pregnant and struggling with swelling feet, had insisted on running a simple errand to the corner pharmacy for prenatal vitamins Anthony's staff had forgotten. Against his better judgment, he had allowed it 1 block, accompanied by a discreet guard. But word had spread among his enemies that the Rossi household now sheltered a vulnerable pregnant woman. A rival crew from the south side had seen opportunity. 2 unmarked sedans had pulled alongside her on the sidewalk windows, lowering to reveal cold eyes and taunting voices. Tell your boss we know his weak spot now. Emily had frozen dizzy with sudden terror, one hand cradling her belly as the cars idled threateningly. Passers-by hurried past, averting eyes. No one dared intervene in Rossi business. The guard had moved to shield her, but the rivals only laughed, engines revving as if to lunge forward. Anthony had arrived within minutes, tires screeching as his own vehicle cut them off. He stepped out into the biting wind coat unbuttoned despite the cold, fair-skinned face carved with lethal calm. "You put hands on what's mine, you don't walk away," he said, voice low enough to carry the promise of ruin. The standoff lasted seconds, his reputation did the rest. The sedans sped off. But Emily had collapsed against the pharmacy wall legs, giving out numb with shock and cold. He had carried her home again that night, her soft trembling, "Thank you, mister." Rossi breaking something inside him. Now, in this glittering underground suite that symbolized everything he could buy, he faced a different kind of threat, the dismissal of the woman he loved by the very experts his money had summoned. "No," he said quietly. The room stilled again. Dr. Whitmore blinked. "Mr. Rossi, I said no." His voice carried the same steel that made rivals back down on dark streets. "She gets heard." A ripple of unease passed through the doctors. One of the senior consultants stepped forward, tone careful. "Sir, with respect, Miss Harper has no medical training. This is a critical obstetrical emergency. Allowing an unlicensed intervention," could Anthony's eyes flashed. "You think I brought you here to ignore the one person who might save my—" He caught himself, the word family almost escaping. The violent inner conflict surged, the ruthless boss warring with the man whose heart now belonged utterly to this destitute woman he had rescued. Emily's breath hitched. Another contraction seized her, bowing her body. Tears slipped down her cheeks, tears of pain, yes, but also of the deep, humiliating knowledge that her voice, her hands, her grandmother's sacred wisdom were being weighed and found wanting in this world of wealth and credentials. Anthony crossed the room in 3 strides, ignoring protocol, and dropped to one knee beside the bed. The gesture stunned the doctors into silence, a man of his power kneeling before a former street waif. His hand, large and warm, closed gently over her cold, thin fingers. "Tell me," he said, voice rough with emotion. "Tell me what you need." Emily's eyes met his wide with shock, confusion, and something she dared not name, a dizzying, numbing surge of feeling at being seen, truly seen by this powerful man who had already saved her once. The intensity in his gaze terrified and warmed her in equal measure. I need to touch my belly," she whispered, voice trembling but growing steadier. "Between contractions. When it's soft, I can feel where they are and guide them. 10 minutes, that's all." The lead doctor protested again. "This is highly irregular." Anthony rose slowly, turning to face them. The remorse, the guilt, the burning love, all of it forged into unbreakable resolve. 10 minutes, he said. "You monitor everything. Anything goes wrong, you take over immediately. But she gets her chance." The room held its breath. Emily's heart pounded with terror and gratitude so intense it felt like it might shatter her. No one had ever fought for her voice like this. In the quiet, condensed stillness that followed, broken only by the monitors and her ragged breathing, Anthony returned to her side. His hand brushed a strand of hair from her forehead with a tenderness that belied his fearsome reputation. The offer had been made. Now came the hardest part, whether the world would finally listen to the poor girl from southern Illinois whose hands carried generations of hidden wisdom. The underground birthing suite in Anthony Rossi's Gold Coast mansion held its breath as the fetal monitors traced deeper, more dangerous dips, sharp warnings that the twins were running out of time. The 12 obstetricians shifted uneasily, their expensive scrubs and confident postures suddenly seeming fragile in the face of Anthony's quiet iron command. 10 minutes, he repeated, voice low but unyielding, the same tone that had made hardened rivals back down on dark Chicago streets. "She gets 10 minutes. Dr. Elena Whitmore's face tightened with professional alarm. "Mr. Rossi, this is against every protocol. We are dealing with severe preeclampsia and persistent malpresentation in twins. Any delay could—" "I heard you," Anthony cut in, his fair-skinned features carved with strained dark eyes burning. "But you've tried everything for 40 hours. Nothing's changed. She says she can help. We give her the chance." The room erupted in restrained protest, murmured concerns about liability, about unlicensed intervention, about the billionaire whose wife might bleed out on an operating table if they waited. Anthony stood, unmoving, broad shoulders squared beneath his tailored shirt, the weight of his empire pressing down on the moment. Wealth had always bought him control private jets that crossed oceans and hours homes, with lake views that shimmered like jewels, security details that neutralized threats before they formed. Yet here in this sanctuary he had built with millions control was slipping through his fingers like sand. Inside his chest a storm raged. Guilt clawed deeper than ever before for the lost hour on Lakeshore Drive, when rivals blocked their path for every shadow. His world cast over Emily's fragile life, for the decades of choices that had hardened him into a man who could command fear but not fate. Remorse for his long-dead wife lost in a hospital twin delivery 30 years ago, resurfaced like blood from an old wound. He had sworn never to stand helpless again. Yet here he was, watching the woman he loved with a passion that had struck him like lightning. That rainy Southside night fight for her life and the lives of her babies. That love tore at him most violently of all. It was unreasonable, this depth of feeling. Emily Harper was 31, destitute, rescued from the streets, where she had endured nights of biting Illinois wind slicing through a sleeping bag riddled with holes, waking numb and shivering beside highways. She had known hunger that twisted the stomach into knots. Humiliation that burned hotter than cold food bank lines, where strangers averted. Eyes evictions from crumbling trailers, jobs lost because morning sickness made her too slow. He had given her warmth, food safety in his mansion of marble and crystal. Yet she still carried that guarded, fearful politeness, still called him Mr. Rossi, in her soft southern Illinois drawl, as if waiting for the kindness to end. And he loved her for it, for her quiet strength, for the way she folded laundry with careful hands, for the shy, curious glances she sometimes risked when she thought he wasn't looking. The surge had been instant and overwhelming that first night, carrying her slight, malnourished frame to his car. It had only grown fiercer over 2 years, a burning devotion he buried beneath layers of control. Now it threatened to consume him entirely. Emily lay trembling on the bed, thin arms clutching the sheets as another contraction built. The pain was a white-hot wave crashing over her until the world blurred at the edges. Dizziness swept through her numbness, spreading from her fingers to her heart. She felt small, powerless, the poor girl whose voice had never mattered, yet Anthony's defiance on her behalf sent a confusing, numbing warmth through the fear. No one had ever fought for her like this. The shock of it left her disoriented, tears slipping silently down her cheeks. Dr. Whitmore made one final appeal, voice tight. "Sir, if something goes wrong, then it's on me," Anthony said, the words final. He turned back to Emily, dropping once more to one knee beside her, a gesture so out of character for the man who ruled Chicago's shadows that the doctors fell silent in stunned disbelief. His large hand closed gently over her cold, swollen fingers. "You have 10 minutes, Emily," he said, voice rough with emotion he could no longer hide. "Do what you need to do." Emily's breath caught. The intensity in his dark eyes, the raw, unguarded protectiveness sent a jolt through her exhausted body. For the first time she saw past the wealthy, powerful man who had rescued her to the torment beneath guilt, remorse, and something deeper, something that made her heart stutter in confusion and fearful hope. Then quietly, so only she could hear, he added the words that would change everything. "I can't lose you. Not like I lost her." The confession hung between them in the hushed room. Emily's eyes widened, shock and deep disorientation crashing over her. Her who was her, but there was no time to ask. The monitor screamed another warning as both fetal heart rates plummeted simultaneously. The room erupted in urgent movement. Anthony rose slowly, turning to the lead doctor. His face was ashen, but his voice carried the steel of a man who had faced down armed rivals in frozen streets. "She's doing this," he said. "Monitor everything. If there's any sign of distress, any sign, you take over immediately. But until then, you stand back." "Doctor," Whitmore hesitated, then nodded sharply. "Agreed. But I stay right here. Full responsibility remains mine." The doctors stepped back, forming a tense circle, eyes fixed on screens and on Emily's fragile form. Emily's hands, calloused from years of scrubbing floors in the mansion, once rough from survival on the streets, trembled as nurses helped adjust pillows to support her. Between contractions, when her belly softened, she placed her palms gently on the swollen curve. Tears blurred her vision, but memory guided her Grandma Ruth's voice in that cold farmhouse kitchen, teaching her to feel the shape of life beneath skin, to listen with fingers when machines and money were nowhere to be found. Anthony stood at her side, one hand resting lightly on her shoulder, anchor and confession all at once. The love burning in his chest felt like it might incinerate him. He had built an empire on never showing weakness, yet here he was, staking everything, her life, the twins' lives, his own heart, on the hidden wisdom of a woman the world had overlooked. Another memory flashed 6 months earlier when Emily, heavy with child and slowed by swelling, had been sent on a simple errand to a nearby market. Rivals sensing weakness had orchestrated another bold confrontation, 3 vehicles boxing in her escort at a busy Gold Coast intersection. Windows down, voices mocking, "Tell Rossi his charity case is costing him." Emily had stood frozen on the sidewalk, dizzy with fear, one hand cradling her belly as traffic snarled around them. Anthony had arrived like thunder vehicle, screeching to a halt. He stepped out into the October chill coat, open, fair-skinned face, lethal with calm fury. "You come near her again," he said quietly, "and every favor you've ever been owed disappears." The rivals had weighed the cost and fled. He had carried Emily back to the mansion himself that day, her soft "Thank you, Mr. Rossi," whispered against his shoulder, breaking him further. Now, in this moment of ultimate defiance, he channeled that same protective fire. Emily's hands moved with practiced gentleness, feeling guiding, coaxing. The room watched in stunned silence. as the first small shift registered on the ultrasound screen. Anthony's grip on her shoulder tightened, not with pressure but with desperate hope. The 10 minutes had begun. In the quiet, condensed stillness, between her labored breaths and the monitor's urgent beeps, two hearts, his torn by love and remorse, hers by poverty's lingering shame and sudden overwhelming gratitude, reached across the vast disparity that had defined their worlds. And for the first time, the overlooked woman from southern Illinois was not invisible. Emily Harper's hands, thin, calloused from years of scrubbing marble floors in Anthony Rossi's mansion, and before that, from scraping frost from car windows on freezing southern Illinois nights, rested on her swollen belly with a gentleness that belied the storm inside her. The underground birthing suite, October of the year 2025, was silent, except for the urgent beeping of monitors and her own ragged breathing. 12 elite obstetricians stood in a tense semicircle, eyes flicking between ultrasound screens and the fragile woman on the bed. Anthony Rossi remained at her side, his large hand still covering her shoulder fingers, trembling almost imperceptibly with the force of everything he could not say. The first contraction had barely eased when Emily began. Between waves, when her uterus softened, she pressed her palms carefully, first high on the left side, feeling for the hard curve of the posterior twin spine, then lower on the right, locating the shoulder of the transverse one. Tears slipped silently down her cheeks, not only from pain but from the overwhelming surge of memory. Grandma Ruth's kitchen kerosene lamp flickering, her grandmother's voice steady and kind. "Don't fight the baby child. Dance with it," gentle like coaxing a flower open. Emily's voice, soft and trembling, escaped in a whisper, meant only for the twins and perhaps for the man whose presence anchored her. "Come on, little ones. We're gonna fix this." Her hands moved with practiced certainty, slow, rhythmic pressure upward, and to the right on the posterior twin, suggesting rather than forcing, waiting for the body to respond. The room watched in stunned stillness, as the ultrasound screen registered the first small shift, a few degrees of rotation, the spine easing away from her own. One of the residents gasped quietly. "There's movement." "Doctor." Elena Whitmore leaned closer to the monitor, eyes widening. "Heart rate on baby A is stabilizing, climbing back to 140. Anthony's breath caught. He felt it like a physical blow, the first crack of hope in 40 hours of torment. The love burning in his chest, already fierce, flared into something almost painful. This woman whom he had lifted from a rain-soaked gutter, thin and malnourished, enduring nights when Illinois wind had cut through her like knives, this woman was doing what his wealth, his power, his summoned army of experts could not. Guilt and remorse tore deeper for every moment he had kept her in his world, yet failed to fully shield her for the rivals whose threats had delayed help for the life he led that cast such long shadows. He remembered a confrontation 3 months earlier when Emily, visibly pregnant and slowed by exhaustion, had simply wanted fresh air and walked to the small park across from the mansion. A rival crew, emboldened by rumors of Rossi's weakness, had sent 2 cars to circle the block, slowly windows down, voices carrying across the manicured lawn. Pretty girl out alone. Shame if something happened. Emily had frozen on the park bench, dizziness sweeping her as fear gripped her heart. She had known that kind of threat in her old life, unjust, unfair, the powerful preying on the powerless. Anthony had appeared within minutes, striding from the mansion gates like judgment itself. Coat open to the October chill, fair-skinned face carved with lethal calm. "You're on my block," he said quietly to the drivers. "Leave now or you don't leave at all." Engines revved once in defiance, then peeled away. He had carried Emily home that day too, her soft, fearful, "Thank you, Mr. Rossi," whispered against his neck, breaking his heart anew. Now in this glittering sanctuary, his money had built her hands. Those humble, work-worn hands were accomplishing the miracle. Another contraction built. Emily kept her palms steady, breathing through it, waiting for the uterus to relax again. When it did, she adjusted, finding new leverage on the transverse twin, applying the gentlest rotational pressure, murmuring in her soft southern drawl, "Just a little more, sweet one. Turn for mama." The second shift came faster. The ultrasound captured it clearly, the shoulder easing downward, the body beginning to rotate into proper alignment. "Baby B is moving, doctor," Whitmore announced, voice thick with disbelief. Full rotation in progress. Heart rates climbed steadily. The frantic beeping slowed to a stronger, healthier rhythm. Anthony's grip on Emily's shoulder tightened, not with force but with desperate gratitude. Tears blurred his vision for the first time in decades. The violent inner conflict that had defined him, ruthless empire builder versus the man capable of devastating love, shattered in that moment. All the power he wielded meant nothing compared to this, the woman he loved with every fiber of his being, using wisdom born of poverty and hardship to save her children. Emily felt the twins respond, She felt it in her palms and her bones, the subtle yielding the small bodies trusting her guidance. Tears flowed freely now, mingling relief and exhaustion, and the deep aching memory of every unjust night she had endured alone. Nights when wind had howled through abandoned buildings, when hunger had kept her awake more surely than cold, when she had curled around her growing belly on hard ground and whispered apologies to unborn babies for bringing them into such a cruel world. Yet here in a room of crystal light and priceless equipment, her grandmother's knowledge passed down through generations of poor women with no access to schools or hospitals was proving stronger than all of it. One final adjustment. Emily's hands trembling with fatigue guided the transverse twin into perfect position. The ultrasound confirmed it, both babies now occiput, anterior heads down, aligned for descent. "There," she whispered, voice breaking as her hands fell away. "They're ready." The monitors sang a new song, strong, steady heartbeats filling the room. Dr. Whitmore performed a quick internal exam, her professional mask cracking entirely. Full dilation. Station +2. Both in optimal position. She looked up at Emily, eyes shining with awe. "You did it." A collective exhale swept the room. Nurses moved swiftly to prepare for delivery, but the urgency had shifted from crisis to controlled, joyful anticipation. Anthony sank slowly to his knees beside the bed again, this time not in command but in surrender. His forehead rested gently against Emily's hand, tears falling silently onto the sheet. The burning love he had carried for 2 years, hidden beneath layers of control and remorse, spilled over without restraint. Emily looked down at him, at this powerful man whose world she had entered as a trembling, destitute stranger, and felt her own heart tear open. Confusion, fear, and a dizzying surge of feeling crashed through her. No one had ever knelt for her. No one had ever chosen her voice over experts, her hands over machines. The disparity of their worlds, his of marble and private empires, hers of cold wind and empty stomachs, had never felt wider yet. In this moment it dissolved into something raw and shared. The next contraction came strong and purposeful. Emily's body, exhausted beyond words, suddenly knew exactly what to do. "Push," Dr. Whitmore commanded gently. Emily pushed. Progress came swiftly now, natural, powerful, the way birth was meant to unfold when everything aligned. The room filled with focused energy, doctors and nurses, positioning themselves, monitors, tracing healthy patterns, soft encouragement filling the air. Anthony rose, staying at her side, his hand clasped tightly in hers. Every push tore at him anew, seeing her strength, her pain, knowing he would give every dollar, every favor, every piece of his empire to spare her a single moment of it. One more strong push, and the first twin crowned. "I see the head, doctor," Whitmore said, voice thick with emotion. Emily bore down with everything she had, left a cry escaping that was equal parts exhaustion and triumph. Moments later, a healthy boy slid into waiting hands, strong cry, perfect color, 10 fingers and toes. The second followed minutes after his brother's cry, joining in indignant harmony. 2 perfect boys. The room erupted in relieved tears and quiet cheers. Nurses wrapped the infants in soft blankets, placing them gently on Emily's chest. She sobbed openly, deep, wrenching sobs of joy and disbelief as tiny hands grasped at her. Anthony stood, frozen tears streaming down his fair-skinned face. The remorse, the guilt, the violent love, all of it resolved into one overwhelming truth: she had done it. The woman he loved more than his own life had brought life safely into the world with nothing but her hands and her grandmother's wisdom. He leaned down, pressing his forehead to hers, voice breaking. "You're a miracle, Emily Harper." In the quiet, condensed stillness that followed, broken only by the soft cries of newborns and the gentle hum of monitors, 2 souls forged in vastly different fires found each other across the chasm. The miracle was complete, and something new, fragile and fierce, had only just begun. The cries of the newborn twins, strong, indignant, utterly perfect, filled the underground birthing suite like the first clear notes of a song after hours of silence. One boy, then his brother, placed gently on Emily Harper's chest, their tiny bodies warm and slick against her skin. The room, once thick with crisis, transformed in an instant into a place of stunned, tearful joy. Nurses adjusted soft blankets, monitors settled into steady, reassuring rhythms, and the 12 obstetricians, men and women who had trained at the finest institutions, stood back with expressions ranging from awe to quiet humility. Emily sobbed openly, deep, wrenching sobs that came from the very core of her. Her thin arms, still trembling from exhaustion, cradled her sons as though afraid they might vanish. Tears streamed down her pale cheeks, tracing paths through the sweat, and tracing years of grief as well. She had done it. Against every odd, against the weight of her past, she had brought them safely into the world with nothing but her hands and the wisdom of a grandmother who had never owned more than a small farmhouse and a worn leather notebook. The disparity of the moment struck her like a wave. Here she lay in a room of Italian marble and crystal lighting. surrounded by equipment that cost more than most families earned in years, while memories flooded her of nights curled in the back seat of a rusted sedan, wind howling through cracked windows, her malnourished body shivering so violently she feared miscarriage. Nights when hunger had been a constant companion, when she had whispered apologies to her unborn babies for the cold, for the emptiness, for the unfair world waiting for them. She had endured eviction notices taped to trailer doors, shelter beds given to others, because she was too far along food bank lines where workers looked away from her swollen belly and threadbare coat. All of it, pitiful, humiliating, unjust, had led to this impossible miracle. Anthony Rossi stood beside the bed, fair-skinned face wet with tears he made no effort to hide. The powerful man who commanded Chicago's shadows, who could silence a room with a glance, was undone. He had knelt twice tonight, once in defiance, once in surrender, and now he collapsed. Slowly into the chair, a nurse pushed forward, his broad shoulders shaking with silent sobs. Raw gratitude poured from him like blood from a reopened wound. He reached out one large hand, hovering uncertainly before settling gently over Emily's, where she cradled the nearest twin. The touch was reverent, almost afraid. His voice, when it came, was rough and broken, barely above a whisper. "You saved them, Emily. You saved them when no one else could." The words tore at her heart. No one had ever spoken to her with such awe, such devotion. Confusion and shock swirled inside her, dizzying, numbing. This man, whose mansion gleamed with wealth she could scarcely comprehend, whose life moved in circles of power and danger, was looking at her as though she were the miracle, not the twins. Anthony's inner world fractured further. Guilt and remorse, already gnawing, now consumed him utterly. He had rescued her from the streets. Yes, lifted her thin, freezing body into his arms that rainy night 2 years ago. But he had also kept her in a world that threatened her at every turn. He remembered the confrontation only weeks before the birth, when Emily, heavy and weary, had taken a rare walk to the small garden behind the mansion. A rival crew, sensing blood in the water, had sent a single black sedan to idle at the gate driver, staring openly, engine running as a message. Emily had frozen on the garden path, hand on her belly, fear paling her face as memories of street threats resurfaced. Anthony had emerged from the house like a storm, coatless, despite the October wind, fair-skinned features carved with lethal promise. "You're on my property," he had said quietly to the driver through the lowered window. "Leave. Or you don't leave." The sedan had reversed slowly, tires crunching on gravel, but the damage was done. Emily had trembled for hours afterward, soft voice apologizing for causing trouble. He had held her that night, careful not to press too close, burning with love he dared not confess. Now watching her hold their sons. No, her sons, he corrected himself fiercely. He felt the full weight of what he had almost lost. The passionate love that had struck him instantly that first night had only deepened, becoming a fire that warmed and scorched him in equal measure. It was unreasonable, this depth of feeling for a woman society had deemed worthless. Yet it was the truest thing he had ever known. He reached into his pocket with trembling fingers and drew out a small gold pendant, a street Christopher medal that had belonged to his own grandmother, passed down through generations of Italian-American women who had known hardship. It was warm from his skin, worn smooth by decades of worry and prayer. Carefully, reverently, he pressed it into Emily's free hand, closing her fingers around it. "This was hers," he said, voice thick. "She brought life into hard places, too. Now it's yours. For them. For you." Emily stared at the medal, then at him, eyes wide with shock and deep disorientation. The gesture undid her completely. No one had ever given her something so personal, so sacred. The wealth it represented, the history, the love was overwhelming. Tears fell faster as she curled her fingers around the warm medal. "Thank you, Mr. Rossi," she whispered, the habitual politeness slipping out even now, soft and timid. The formality broke him. "Anthony," he said gently, leaning closer, forehead nearly touching hers. "Please, call me Anthony." The room around them seemed to fade, the doctors quietly, conferring nurses, tending monitors, the soft coos of the twins. In that condensed stillness, only the three of them existed. Emily exhausted and radiant. The babies perfect and new. Anthony undone by gratitude and love. Dr. Whitmore approached quietly, her own eyes red. "They're both healthy, strong. Apgar scores good weight considering the circumstances. You gave them the best possible start, Miss Harper." The other doctors murmured agreement, some stepping forward to offer quiet congratulations. Their earlier skepticism transformed into respect. One older physician, voice gruff with emotion, added, "I've been doing this 30 years. Never seen anything like what you just did." Emily's sobs quieted into soft hiccups as she looked down at her sons, one with a tuft of dark hair like Anthony's, the other with auburn wisps like her own. She felt the weight of their tiny bodies, the miracle of their breaths against her skin, and for the first time in her life, the crushing poverty that had defined her felt distant. Not gone, the memories of cold wind, empty stomachs, unjust nights would never fully leave, but overpowered for this moment by something stronger. Anthony remained at her side hand, never leaving hers. The violent inner conflict that had torn him for years, the ruthless empire builder versus the man capable of devastating tenderness, resolved into fierce clarity. He would protect this. All of it. Whatever the cost. Outside, the October wind howled against the mansion's stone walls. But down here, in the warm glow of crystal lights, two boys drew their first peaceful breaths, cradled by a mother who had defied every odd, watched over by a man whose heart now belonged entirely to them all. The birth was complete. The raw gratitude, hers quiet and disbelieving, his fierce and boundless, had only just begun to reshape their worlds. The hours following the birth passed in a soft golden haze. The twins, named Caleb and Noah, in quiet whispers between Emily and Anthony, nursed, contentedly slept in warmed bassinets, lined with the finest cotton, and filled the underground suite with the gentle sounds of new life. Emily, propped against pillows in a bed that felt like a cloud, compared to the hard ground she had once known, drifted in and out of exhausted sleep, her thin face radiant despite the shadows of hardship etched there. Anthony Rossi never left her side. He sat in the leather chair, pulled close to the bed, fair-skinned hand resting lightly on hers, eyes tracing every breath of mother and sons. The burning love that had consumed him for 2 years now blazed without restraint, mingled with a gratitude so raw it bordered on pain. Yet beneath it, new torment stirred. Word of what had happened in the birthing suite was already spreading quiet murmurs among the doctors. Discreet messages to hospital administrators, inevitable leaks into the medical community. Anthony knew what came next. Resistant scrutiny, the cold machinery of institutions protecting their own. It began sooner than he expected. By dawn, as October light filtered through the mansion's upper windows far above Dr. Elena Whitmore requested a private word in the adjoining conference area. Her face was composed, but exhaustion and conflict warred in her eyes. "Mr. Rossi," she began carefully, "what happened here last night was extraordinary, medically inexplicable by conventional standards, but it was also irregular, highly irregular. Allowing an unlicensed individual to perform manual version, even externally, exposes everyone to significant liability. The hospital boards, the state medical society, they'll demand review. There could be sanctions, investigations." Anthony's jaw tightened. He had anticipated this. His empire thrived on navigating threats, legal, illegal, institutional. Yet the thought of Emily facing scrutiny, of her gift being questioned or punished, ignited fresh violence in his heart. Guilt surged anew. He had brought her into his world, offered safety, only to expose her to new dangers. "I understand," he said quietly. "But she saved lives. 2 lives that were slipping away under your protocols." "Doctor." Whitmore nodded slowly. "I know. And personally, I believe what she did should be studied, validated. But the system doesn't move that fast. Or that kindly." The resistance grew swiftly. By midday, calls came from hospital legal departments. Anonymous tips reached regulatory boards. A prominent obstetric journal editor, hearing whispers, requested comment on unorthodox practices in high-profile private care. Anthony's own attorneys warned of potential complaints for practicing medicine without a license against Emily. Emily overheard fragments from her bed where she lay, cradling the twins. Fear crept back in, cold and familiar. She had known this feeling all her life, the poor girl stepping out of place, punished for daring to rise. Memories flooded her of unjust evictions, of welfare offices closing cases because she didn't qualify, of nights when wind howled through shelters that turned her away for lack of space. Her voice, when she whispered to Anthony, was soft and timid. "They're going to take it away, aren't they? Everything you gave me." Anthony knelt beside her again, taking her hand. "No one takes anything from you again. Not while I'm breathing." The inner tearing in his heart intensified. He had power, wealth beyond measure, private foundations, political connections, favors owed across Chicago. Yet protecting the woman he loved from the very institutions his donations supported felt like battling his own shadow. He remembered a confrontation mere days before the birth. Emily, restless in late pregnancy, had asked to visit a small public clinic for a routine check, wanting in her quiet way to not burden his private doctors. Against advice, he had allowed it, sending discreet security. But rivals, ever watchful, had seen opportunity. 2 vehicles had tailed her escort through Gold Coast traffic, pulling alongside at a stoplight, windows down, voices carrying threats veiled as warnings. "Tell Rossi we know where his soft spots go for checkups now." Emily had paled in the back seat, hand on her belly, dizziness sweeping her as old fears resurfaced. Anthony had intercepted the convoy personally, stepping into traffic with lethal calm. "You follow her again," he had said to the drivers, "and every route you own closes." The vehicles had scattered, but the incident had left Emily trembling for days, apologizing softly for causing trouble. Now that same protectiveness flared into action. Within 48 hours, Anthony mobilized. He convened an emergency meeting in the mansion's upper library, walnut shelves lined with rare books, lake views through floor-to-ceiling windows, a room that spoke of generational wealth. Present were his attorneys, Dr. Whitmore and 2 supportive colleagues, hospital administrators from Northwestern and Rush, and most importantly, Emily, pale but determined in a wheelchair, twins sleeping in bassinets beside her. The administrators began with caution protocols, liability precedent. Anthony listened, then spoke with quiet steel. "I'm prepared to make a $20 million donation split between your institutions to establish the Harper Community Birth Wisdom Center, a dedicated wing for integrating traditional hands-on techniques with modern obstetrics. Emily Harper will serve as lead consultant under full medical supervision. You'll develop training programs, document outcomes, publish findings." The room stilled. One administrator cleared his throat. "That's generous." "But regulatory approval will come," Anthony said, "because the alternative is headlines no board wants. Hospitals punish women who saved twins when experts failed. I can ensure those stories run in every major outlet, or we partner validate her methods scientifically and lead the nation in maternal care innovation." Dr. Whitmore leaned forward. "I'm willing to champion this." What Emily did wasn't luck. It was mastery born of generational observation. "We've lost tactile skills in modern practice. This could reduce unnecessary interventions, improve outcomes in underserved communities." The administrators exchanged glances. $20 million was more than annual budgets for entire wings. Combined with the threat of public backlash and Anthony's unspoken influence, they calculated quickly. "We'll need to structure it carefully," the senior one said finally. "Pilot program status, oversight committees. But, yes, we can make this work." Emily listened in stunned silence, tears slipping down her cheeks. From destitute nights of cold wind and hunger to this, her name on a center her grandmother's wisdom honored, the shock left her dizzy heart pounding with confused, fearful joy. Anthony's hand found hers under the table, squeezing gently. Later, alone in the recovering suite, Emily whispered, "Why are you doing all this?" "For me," Anthony knelt once more, habit now when emotion overtook him. His voice was rough with everything he had never said. "Because you deserve it. Because what you carry, your knowledge, your strength, your heart is worth more than anything I've ever owned." He paused, the burning love finally spilling over. "And because I love you, Emily Harper. I've loved you since the night I found you in the rain." The confession hung in the quiet air. Emily's world tilted. Shock, confusion, deep disorientation crashed through her. The poor girl who had never been chosen, suddenly loved fiercely by the most powerful man she had ever known. Tears fell faster. I don't know what to say," she whispered, voice trembling. "You don't have to say anything yet," he said gently. "Just know it's true. And nothing, no board, no rival, no shadow from my world will take this from us." Outside, October wind rattled the mansion windows, but inside, systemic walls began to crumble under the weight of one man's devotion and one woman's overlooked wisdom. The resistance was bending. Change, slow, hard-won, but real, was coming. 3 months had passed since the night Caleb and Noah entered the world, and the Gold Coast mansion had softened in ways Anthony Rossi never imagined possible. The upper floors, once echoing with the quiet footsteps of staff and the occasional low voices of business, now carried the gentle sounds of infancy. Soft coos, the rhythmic creak of a rocking chair, Emily's hushed lullabies drifting down, marble hallways. Sunlight poured through tall windows onto nurseries fitted with handcrafted cribs, soft blankets, woven from the finest materials, toys that had been chosen with careful love, rather than limitless expense. Emily moved through these rooms with a quiet wonder that still bordered on disbelief. Her body had begun to fill out, cheeks no longer hollow from malnutrition, arms gaining strength from regular meals prepared by chefs who now took secret pride in her shy compliments. Yet the memories of extremity lingered like ghosts. Nights when Illinois wind had sliced through a sleeping bag under highway overpasses, when she had rationed a single apple over 3 days to quiet the hunger pangs twisting her pregnant belly, when shelter doors had closed because she carried no identification, or because someone else was deemed more deserving. Those memories surfaced in quiet moments, bringing tears she wiped away before the twins could sense her distress. The Harper Community Birth Wisdom Center had opened its doors in a newly renovated wing of Northwestern Memorial. Bright, welcoming spaces, blending modern examination rooms with comfortable consultation areas decorated in warm earth. Tunes, Emily served as lead consultant, teaching small groups of residents and attending high-risk deliveries under Dr. Elena Whitmore's supervision. Word spread slowly but steadily. Fewer unnecessary interventions, higher rates of successful vaginal births. After previous complications, mothers from underserved neighborhoods requesting her specifically. Yet not everyone embraced the change. Among the original 12 obstetricians who had witnessed the twins' birth, one in particular, Dr. Marcus Langford, a senior specialist from Rush with a reputation for uncompromising adherence to evidence-based protocols, had remained openly skeptical. He had left the mansion that night without a word, muttering about anecdotal risks and departure from standards. In faculty meetings and private emails, he questioned the program's validity, warning of potential harm if unscientific methods gained traction. Emily felt his disapproval like a shadow. It echoed the dismissals of her past caseworkers who closed files, employers who saw only her poverty, strangers who looked through her on cold streets. She kept her head down, voice soft and polite, in meetings guarding the fragile new life she had been given. Anthony watched it all with growing torment. The passionate love that had defined him since finding Emily now burned alongside fierce protectiveness. Every skeptical glance aimed at her, every whispered doubt felt like a personal wound. Guilt gnawed deeper for the dangers his world still posed, for the institutional barriers his money could bend but not always break. He remembered a tense confrontation only weeks after the birth. Emily, stronger but still cautious, had attended her first public maternal health panel downtown. Anthony's security had been discreet, but rivals emboldened by rumors of his new priorities had orchestrated a bold show. 3 SUVs had pulled up outside the venue as the event ended, blocking the exit lane, drivers staring openly as Emily emerged with Dr. Whitmore. No words spoken, just the silent threat of presence. Anthony had arrived within minutes, stepping from his vehicle into the crisp January wind, though the memory felt fresh as October. Coat open, fair-skinned face, carved with controlled fury. "You're in my city making gestures you can't finish," he had said quietly to the lead driver. Engines revved once, then the SUVs dispersed. But Emily had trembled in the car ride home, soft voice whispering, "I don't want to cause you more trouble." The incident had hardened his resolve. Now, in late January of the year 2026, an unexpected turn arrived. Dr. Langford requested a private meeting at the new center. Emily braced for criticism, heart pounding with old fears. Anthony insisted on attending his presence alone, a quiet statement of protection. They gathered in a sunlit consultation room, soft chairs arranged in a circle, a small table holding tea and fresh fruit walls adorned with photographs of mothers and babies from the program's first months. Dr. Langford entered carrying a worn leather portfolio face drawn with something Emily could not read. He did not sit immediately. Instead, he opened the portfolio and withdrew a stack of yellowed papers, handwritten journals, edges curled with age. "My great-grandmother," he said, quietly, voice rough. She was a lay midwife in downstate Illinois coal towns during the Depression and after. Delivered hundreds of babies, many twins in homes without electricity or running water. These are her notes. Emily's breath caught. Anthony's hand found hers under the table. Dr. Langford laid the journals gently on the table. "I never read them closely. Thought they were quaint. Folklore." His voice cracked. "But after that night in your home, Mr. Rossi, I went through them. Page after page describing external version techniques for posterior and transverse presentations. The exact hand placements Emily used. Pressure points, timing between contractions. Ways to listen with fingers when no monitors existed." He met Emily's eyes, his own red-rimmed. "She wrote about a young girl she taught," said the child had, the knowing in her hands. "The dates match your grandmother's era, Miss Harper. The towns are only miles apart. It's possible they knew each other, or learned from the same tradition." Silence filled the room, thick and sacred. Emily's tears fell silently. Validation from the most unexpected source, the doctor who had doubted her most fiercely. The connection bridged generations, turning her hidden wisdom into documented legacy. Dr. Langford continued, voice steadier now. "I was wrong. Arrogant. I've spent weeks reviewing outcomes from your consultations. The data is compelling, lower intervention rates, better maternal satisfaction, no adverse events." He paused. "I'd like to co-author a paper with you and Dr. Whitmore. Submit to major journals. Help establish this as recognized practice." Anthony's grip on Emily's hand tightened, gratitude and love surging so fiercely he feared his heart might break. Emily could only nod, overwhelmed. The poor girl from southern Illinois, once invisible, once dismissed, now sat in a center bearing her name, receiving apology and partnership from a man whose ancestors had walked the same hard paths as her own. Later, alone in the mansion nursery, Emily held the twins close, showing them the faded journals Dr. Langford had gifted her. Anthony stood in the doorway, watching the scene with eyes shining. "You see," he whispered, crossing to kneel beside her rocking chair. "Your grandmother's light never went out. It reached all the way here." Emily looked up at him, the man whose love had reshaped her world. Confusion and fear had given way to something deeper. Trust, warmth, the first stirrings of returned feeling she scarcely dared name. In the quiet, condensed stillness of that winter afternoon, with snow beginning to fall, softly past the windows, validation arrived not as thunder but as gentle snow, covering old wounds, making space for new growth. The second twist had turned doubt into alliance, and the hidden wisdom carried through poverty and hardship was finally undeniably seen. 3 months after the validation that had bridged generations, the Gold Coast mansion stood quiet under a late April sky in the year 2026. Caleb and Noah, now sturdy infants with bright eyes and trusting grips, filled the upper nurseries with laughter and the soft thump of crawling explorations. Emily Harper moved through the sunlit halls with a confidence she was only beginning to trust, her body stronger, her voice less timid in consultations at the Harper Center, her heart slowly opening to the impossible truth that she was loved, truly loved by Anthony Rossi. Yet shadows lengthened. Anthony had felt them gathering for weeks. Rivals emboldened by whispers of his shifting priorities, the birth center, the public retreat from certain old dealings had grown bolder. Tense street confrontations had multiplied vehicles tailing his convoy through downtown traffic. Silent stares across restaurant parking lots. Anonymous messages hinting at vulnerabilities. He had handled each with the same lethal calm that had built his empire, meeting threats head-on in broad daylight. Voice low and unyielding. "You test me now, you lose everything." The challengers backed down each time, but Anthony knew the pattern. Pressure was building. He never told Emily the full extent. She had endured enough fear. The betrayal came from within. His longest trusted lieutenant, Vincent Moretti, no blood relation, but a brother in every way that mattered for 30 years, had turned. Federal pressure, promises of immunity, a new life for his own family. Anthony would learn the details later. What mattered was the result on a quiet Thursday morning as Emily prepared for a routine teaching session at the center, and Anthony reviewed foundation documents in his study. The raid struck. Armored vehicles surrounded the mansion without warning. Dozens of federal agents in tactical gear poured through gates, and doors' shouts echoing off marble floors. Federal agents, hands in the air. Years of carefully gathered evidence, wiretaps, financial trails, Vincent's testimony unleashed in one coordinated assault. Anthony's security team, loyal but outnumbered and legally constrained, stood down. Anthony himself was in the upstairs nursery, lifting Noah into his arms for a morning cuddle, when the first breach sounded below. He handed the baby to a terrified nanny face, hardening into the mask that had intimidated Chicago's underworld for decades. Emily, in the adjoining playroom with Caleb, froze at the thunder of boots on stairs. Horror crashed over her memories of sudden evictions, of police lights outside trailers, of powerless flight. Her legs went numb, dizziness sweeping her as agents burst into the nursery wing. Down on the floor. Now Anthony stepped forward, shielding the doorway to the playroom. "This is my home. You have warrants, show them. But you will not frighten the children or the woman in that room." An agent raised a weapon. Anthony did not flinch. The standoff lasted seconds, but long enough for a stray command, a nervous trigger finger, a miscalculation in the chaos. A single shot rang out, intended as warning, but striking true. Anthony staggered, blood blooming dark across his white shirt, high on the left shoulder near the chest. Pain exploded, but he stayed on his feet, roaring, "Stand down, you want me, take me, leave them." Agents swarmed him, forcing him to his knees, cuffs clicking cold around wrists. Emily, hearing the shot, screamed, a raw tearing sound born of every unjust terror she had ever known. She stumbled into the hallway, Caleb clutched to her chest, vision blurring with shock and tears. Anthony, blood soaking his shirt, met her eyes across the chaos. The passionate love that had defined him surged one final time. Fierce, protective, absolute. "Emily, take the boys. Go with the nanny. You'll be safe. I swear it." Agents pulled him toward the stairs. He did not resist, but every step cost him blood, trailing on priceless rugs, breath ragged, vision graying at the edges. Emily collapsed against the wall, legs giving out dizziness and numbness overwhelming her. The mansion, once her impossible sanctuary, was invaded, the man who had become her world dragged away bleeding. The unfairness crushed her from cold wind and empty stomachs to this safety shattered in moments by forces she could not fight. But something deeper stirred. As agents cleared the nursery wing, declaring it secure, Emily, still weak from the shock, saw Anthony slump against the banister halfway down the grand staircase, face ashen, blood pooling faster. An agent shouted for a medic, but protocol delayed suspect first, medical aid second. Emily's heart tore open. She remembered the birthing suite below the hidden space where she had saved her sons with forbidden knowledge. Pressure points Grandma Ruth had taught for postpartum bleeding, firm, steady compression to slow shock to buy time. Without thought, driven by love, she had only begun to name. Emily acted. She thrust Caleb into the nanny's arms. Lock the door. Keep them safe. Then she ran barefoot down the hall, past stunned agents too surprised to stop her immediately. Ma'am, stand back. She ignored them, reaching Anthony as he sagged against the wall, agents momentarily distracted by radio chatter. Anthony, she whispered, voice breaking but steady. His eyes dimming with blood loss found hers. Shock and fierce gratitude flashed there. Emily dropped to her knees in the blood hands, those same hands that had turned twins, moving with desperate precision. She pressed hard beneath his collarbone fingers, finding the points her grandmother had shown her on fading diagrams, locations to slow arterial flow to stabilize until help arrived. Her palms slick with his blood held firm. Agents shouted, pulling at her shoulders. Step away, he's in custody. No, she cried, voice raw but unyielding, the first time she had ever raised it in defiance. He's dying, let me help. The room where she had saved her sons became their refuge. Emily dragged Anthony's weakening body down the private elevator, agents hesitating at the sight of her blood-soaked determination radios crackling for guidance. She barricaded the birthing suite door with a heavy medical cabinet, lights flickering on automatically. Inside the space of marble and crystal where miracles had begun, she worked. Towels pressed hard, hands maintaining pressure. Voice soft, now timid no longer but tender. Stay with me, Anthony. Please. You saved me. Now let me save you. Anthony's hand found hers, grip weakening but eyes burning with love that transcended pain. I knew. You would, he whispered, voice faint. Always. My miracle. Medics breached the door minutes later, guided by protocol, finally yielding to humanity. They found Emily cradling him, covered in his blood, refusing to release her, whole tears falling onto his chest. Paramedics took over, stabilizing, rushing him to emergency surgery under heavy guard. Emily collapsed, then numb, shaking the violent intensity of love and terror tearing her world apart. The shocking betrayal had struck at the heart of everything Anthony had built. But in the blood-soaked room where life had triumphed once before, Emily's hands, born of poverty, forged in hardship, strengthened by love, had bought him time. The life or death choice was made, and the woman once destitute had become the savior of the man who had given her the world. Anthony Rossi survived. Surgery repaired the damage, skilled hands, guided by the same modern knowledge he had once funded without question. Weeks in protective custody followed, quiet rooms, guarded doors, federal oversight while charges were carefully reduced through old favors, public support for his maternal health philanthropy, and the undeniable truth that the raid had nearly cost an innocent life. By early autumn of the year, 2026, Anthony walked free, his empire dissolved into legitimate investments he had quietly built over decades. Real estate, charitable foundations, the thriving Harper Community Birth Wisdom Center. He chose a new path entirely. A modest lakeside home north of Chicago, far from the Gold Coast's marble and shadows, became their sanctuary. Purchased under a trust, it offered wide windows onto calm water, wooded grounds for the twins to explore, rooms filled with simple comforts rather than opulence. Emily, Caleb, and Noah moved there with him, the boys now toddling with sturdy legs and fearless curiosity. The change was not easy. Anthony carried fresh torment, gnawing remorse for the life he had led, for the betrayal that had endangered the woman and children he loved more than breath. Nights found him awake, staring at the lake's dark surface, violent conflict raging within the man, who had once ruled through fear, now stripped of power yet richer in ways he had never imagined. Guilt for every cold wind Emily had endured before he found her, for every unjust night she had suffered alone. Emily too wrestled with ghosts. Memories of extremity still visited the thin, malnourished body shivering in abandoned cars, sleep stolen by howling wind, and gnawing hunger, the humiliating powerlessness of a woman society had overlooked. She would wake some nights dizzy with old fear, heart pounding as though eviction notices still waited outside the door. Yet here she was, loved fiercely, by a man whose past wealth had dwarfed her poverty, whose present devotion bridged every gap. Love between them had simmered for years, restrained glances, protective gestures, quiet confessions in the mansion's shadowed halls. The raid, the blood, the life or death choice in the birthing suite had shattered the final barriers. It ignited slowly then, all at once. One October evening, as golden leaves drifted across the lake and the twins slept peacefully upstairs, Anthony found Emily on the wide porch, wrapped in a soft blanket against the cool air. She gazed at the water, eyes distant with memory. He sat beside her without speaking, a quiet, condensed stillness that had become their language. Then, voice rough with everything he carried, he said, "I never told you enough. How you saved me long before that day in the suite. You gave me something to protect, something worth changing for." Emily turned to him, tears glistening. The confusion and fear that had once guarded her heart melted under the intensity in his eyes. "I was so afraid," she whispered, voice soft but no longer timid. "Afraid this was a dream. Afraid I didn't deserve." Anthony took her hand, pressing it to his chest where the scar still ached faintly. "You deserve everything," he said fiercely. "You always did." The space between them vanished. Years of restrained love exploded, passionate, intense, all-consuming. Gentle at first, then desperate. Embraces that spoke of survival and gratitude. Kisses that carried the weight of cold nights, redeemed. Whispered promises against skin, once marked by hardship and remorse. Wealth and poverty, power and powerlessness dissolved in the truth that love recognized no such divisions, only hearts that had found each other across every barrier of circumstance, color, or past. They married quietly the following spring beside the lake under blooming trees with only close family Dr. Whitmore and a few trusted friends. Emily wore a simple dress that fluttered in the warm breeze. Anthony, eyes shining, paced the restored street. Christopher medal on a chain around her neck. The twins toddled down the aisle, scattering petals, laughing in the sunlight. Life settled into a rhythm of deep, humane joy. Emily continued leading the Harper Center, now expanded nationwide, teaching that true knowledge transcends credentials, that compassionate education bridges old wisdom and new science. Anthony served on the foundation board, quietly funding programs for mothers in underserved communities, women who reminded him daily of the girl he had found in the rain. From their story, profound lessons emerged. Knowledge preserved through generations saves lives when least expected. Knowledge shared humbly changes systems. Knowledge rooted in experience rather than privilege deserves honor. Knowledge combined with compassion heals more than medicine alone. Knowledge passed hand to hand ensures no wisdom is ever lost. The lesson of love's power over circumstance repeats quietly in every delivery room, where Emily teaches love transcends wealth and poverty. The lesson of redemption whispers in Anthony's work with at-risk youth, no past is beyond change. The lesson of resilience shines in Emily's gentle strength, hardship forges unbreakable spirits. The lesson of unity echoes in mixed classrooms of doctors and traditional birth workers. True education comes from listening across divides. The lesson of gratitude grounds their family each night. Every day is gift. If this story has moved you, if it has reminded you that hidden knowledge matters, that love conquers every divide, that education and compassion together build a better world, then carry these lessons forward. We wish everyone watching good health, a joyful life, and daily peace. Please subscribe to the YouTube channel Alex Truths like this video and share it with someone who needs encouragement today. There are many more engaging stories waiting for you every day. Tell us in the comments, how did this story touch you? Where have you seen knowledge overlooked or love triumph over hardship in real life? Share your heart. We truly want to hear the emotions stirring within you. Until next time, stay blessed, stay bold, and keep believing. One person and one act of love can change everything. See you in the next video. Disclaimer. All stories on this channel are fictional and created solely for entertainment purposes. Any resemblance to real people, events, or places is purely coincidental.